Hello, and welcome back to In Our Issues, a podcast where we talk about what it's like to be in the shoes of people with mental health issues. I'm Nathan Donnelly, and this week's episode is all about ADHD, misconceptions about a superpower. Discussions about ADHD are on the rise right now, and I feel like there's a lot of conversations that miss the point and or misinterpret what ADHD actually is. So I did some research, brought it to the table, and my co-hosts and I ended up having a great discussion about this. We dive into the neuroscience and also share our own lived experiences with ADHD, as well as discuss its relevance to the modern digital age. This episode goes out to any listeners out there living with ADHD that wish to learn more about their condition so that they may unlock their true potential. And now, without further ado, here is the IOI crew. Welcome back to In Our Issues. Today we're talking about ADHD, and we're going to dispel some of the misconceptions about this superpower. And
I also want to delve in a little bit to misdiagnosis of ADHD.
Absolutely. That's definitely one of my points on here. I wanted to start by saying that, two of us here have been diagnosed with ADHD. That would be me and Bill. So we're going to be speaking from our lived experience with it. If any of you listeners out there are diagnosed or suspect that you have ADHD, we hope that we can help you clear up whether or not you do or whether or not you should seek treatment. Again, are peers and not licensed therapists, but we are peer recovery supporters, and we wish to help support you out there. So,
and I'm not somebody with lived experience with ADHD, but I was at one point misdiagnosed with ADHD.
Oh, you should be on this podcast then.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I think that it can be a fun two sides to the coin.
Two sides to the coin.
Two sides of the same coin.
Absolutely. So first, what ADHD is and what ADHD isn't. So I want to start off with saying it's kind of like what Amanda said about trauma, where ADHD has been trivialized and used as a shorthand description incorrectly a lot. I feel like people will say, I'm so ADD, I'm so ADHD, just like they would say, oh, I'm so traumatized, I'm so traumatic, the fact is that there is actually a measurable effect of the modern digital age on the human brain, and it creates this condition called VAST, which is variable attention stimulus trait. Essentially, it's symptoms of ADHD that arise in people without it because of the speed of modern digital technology and modern culture.
Yeah, I think too, it aligns with that dopamine hit that we get from, social media and interacting. And it can mirror traits of ADHD, but does not mean you have
You're talking
ADHD.
About going from one thing to the next.
Yeah, if you put something into perspective, like TikTok,
that's a perfect example.
I was talking to my boyfriend yesterday about this because I was like, this can't be good for my brain, because one TikTok, I was literally emotionally crying because it was like a really sweet video. And then the next video, I'm literally cracking up laughing because it's so funny. And then the next video, I'm like sad because of like whatever is happening.
It's just all over the place.
Literally within the course of not even 10 minutes, I'm going through 3 different emotions. So it's definitely going to have an impact long term. That's why I have to limit my time on TikTok.
So think of VAST as ADHD's environmentally induced cousin.
Oh, I like that.
It's a trait caused by exposure to distracting nature of technology and not a disorder. So ADHD you have at birth. VAST you develop. And it can be undeveloped when you learn to use your brain in deeper, more thoughtful ways, and not as reactive and not as reactive to emotions.
Oh, that's good news.
Sort of thing.
That's good news.
So, ADHD is an extremely heritable disorder. If you have one parent that has it, there's a 1 in 3 chance that their kids are going to have it, and if you have both, it's 2 in 3. So my dad has ADHD. He hasn't really fully grasped everything. He had no idea until they had me and discovered I had it, and he also discovered he had it. I know he'd be okay with me sharing this. So, but And so we've kind of been learning about it, for better or worse, the hard way or the easy way, throughout the course of our lives.
I think that's really interesting too, because I've seen that happen a lot, at least from a social media perspective, is that a lot of parents, that are becoming more open about mental health, they get their child a diagnostic assessment or like whatever, and they figure out like, oh, their child, has ADHD or their child is autistic.
Yeah.
And they say, a lot of times these are inheritable disorders, and then they look at themselves and the traits that they exhibit in relation to their kid and what they did as children, and they realize like, wow, I exhibited a lot of these traits originally when I was growing up, and I had no idea because there wasn't like words for it.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's really interesting to see the shift in conversation.
So when I got kicked out of physics every day in 11th grade, that's just because we didn't figure that out yet.
Probably.
Okay.
Most
Depending
likely
on why you were kicked out.
Oh, it was. Oh, yeah. Because I was borderline disruptive. I think if by borderline means I took all the attention away from the teacher. So he would say, he was about 85, Mr. Brown, why don't you take an early lunch today?
I love how that voice stuck with you after all this time. You just jumped into that impression.
Yeah.
Like
Early lunch every day. And an A in physics. It drove him crazy. I would grade my own paper. I would bring a red pen to class on test day and write 100 at the top and write a little note saved to the time or whatever. And it was the joy of his existence to be able to find something wrong on one of my tests.
Oh, yeah. But you were pretty good at that kind of stuff, though, yeah?
Yeah.
So it probably irritated him even more.
A little bit.
Yeah, he's just like this kid is like all over the place and he's still getting good grades.
And I think that's something that's important to put into perspective, too. It's not like, and I know we'll talk about this later in the itinerary, it's not like that individuals with ADHD are necessarily lacking anything. A lot of it is just you need to find a way to be engaged that works for you.
Yeah,
exactly.
Constantly.
Misconceptions about a superpower. It's a superpower. It's just our frontal lobes take a little longer to develop than the average person. So we tend to be disruptive and distractive, and not always in a bad way. So basically, for whatever reason, ADHD tends to manifest differently according to biological sex for some reason. Men tend to have ADHD type H, which is hyperactive, and this is not exclusively, and women tend to have ADHD type I, inattentive. My dad has ADHD type I, so it's not exclusive to gender, but it manifests differently, like just for some reason. I'm not sure why.
I'm wondering if it's like, and I have no idea because I don't know the research on this, so take what I say with a grain of salt. I'm wondering if it's like a hormonal thing. Like if hormones are impacting the neurons and, the chemicals that are firing around, if maybe that's why we see that more. I don't know.
That's
very interesting. If you know why, and you're a therapist or a psychiatrist or, just really interested in ADHD and you know about that, let us know in the comments because I'd love to know.
Definitely. Me too.
I'm always down to learn.
Yeah, but no, hormones would make a lot of sense, Amanda. And you have some...
Well, I don't know if that would indicate that as hormone levels change, that those symptoms would decrease
or change.
Yeah.
That could be the case. Who knows?
Because I know hormones affect my mood and my illness.
Yeah,
a lot.
I have some experience with hormones affecting women's behavior and attitudes.
Because of this whole thing, many women go a long time without seeing a diagnosis because the signs of ADHD-I are less obvious to observe. You have the distractibility and quickness of thought, but not the hyperactivity. And the hyperactivity takes a back seat. So you could be sitting there distracted, but not hyperactively bouncing off the walls. It manifests differently based on what type you have, and for some reason with gender.
And some people can have both.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Actually, I don't know why I didn't write this here. You can have ADHD mixed type, which is both, which is symptoms of both.
ADHD-C.
Yeah. Is that what it is?
ADHD-C, which is ADHD combined. Which is a combination. Thank you, words. They're hard. A combination of inattentive and hyperactive.
Okay, bet.
I did a mental health Monday on ADHD very recently, so
it's fresh.
I know a thing or two in my brain.
Was it last week?
No, it was like 2 months ago, I think. So check that out on the Recovery Center of Hamilton County's YouTube page.
8 weeks ago.
We should always plug that whenever we get the chance. We don't have people with ADHD. The name can be kind of deceptive because we don't really have a deficit of attention. We have the opposite. We have an abundance of attention. We have too much attention to control. More attention than we can cope with. Our challenge lies in learning to control it. It's true. So basically, my full attention is taken away from the moment or whatever I'm distracted or whatever I'm trying to focus on. My full attention can just go elsewhere. If something reminds me of something, or if suddenly I start, my writer brain turns on, I start writing a scene in my head or something like that. And I just remove myself from the moment and fully invest in that thing that I've been distracted by.
That's normal stuff. But I think where it goes off the rails is when you don't remember to go back to what you're doing before.
Oh, no, that is absolutely true, because I have noticed that multiple times when I'm just trying to get something done. I will, walk back. I'm just looking for I need a pen to write something down. And then I keep forgetting that I'm looking for a pen and end up, spending an hour or something doing something completely different. And then finally remembering. Yeah. And
you were looking for a pen, but then you step on a Nerf dart, which is on the floor, and you're like, oh my God, I could put a needle in that and stick it in the wall. And so you spend about 2 hours doing that. Shoot it into the wall, and you get to pull it out of the wall, and you're like, Ma, I think I'm hungry. And so you want some pizza rolls, and you put them on a plate, and you go to the microwave, and you open it up, and there's pizza rolls already in there that have been made.
Yeah, that we're just sitting 2
hours ago. Welcome to ADHD.
Dude, the ADHD 101 right here. This is what happens. This is how we live our lives.
I think that was a great step-by-step explanation of it.
Thank you.
That was very just off the cuff.
Because it really helped me put into perspective what goes on in the brain.
It's fascinating.
ADHD. Yeah, my friend has ADHD as well, and it was interesting because I lived with her for a while, and just seeing it manifest in front of me. She was she had not been diagnosed yet at the time. And she had been when she was really, really young. But then I don't know, it just was a thing that she didn't really pay attention to. But as soon as I started picking up on it when we started talking about it, and she was like, yeah, I think this is something that I really do struggle with still. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't really go away, but and just seeing it, that's kind of exactly how it was, what you described. It's just 50 million things at once.
Mm-hmm. I call it the 30-minute trip to the mailbox, which is 10 steps from my couch. It may take me a half an hour to get the mail and get back to the couch, for real.
Somebody explained it to me like this, and I don't know if this will help anybody who doesn't have ADHD to kind of understand it. But for me, it was it's not just A plus B equals C in terms of these are the steps. Mm-hmm. It's a spider web comes out of each step the moment that you do it, right?
That is a great image.
You go to step A, but then from step A, spider webs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then you haven't even made it to B yet because you can't before you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 done, and you get through that. But then sometimes you don't even remember that B is there or exists, or that you were in the middle of doing something. Yeah. Yeah. And so that was just a really interesting explanation when I found it.
Love that. Yeah. I love the spider web. That image is so powerful because that's what it feels like. I'm like, all right, step 1. Oh yeah, these 7 other things that I want to do.
Yeah, that's why,
you know what I mean? It's
that's why from I think it was a video or something, or somebody explaining it to me. I don't remember it, but basically that's why it's even doing a to-do list is difficult for people with ADHD.
Oh, yes.
That's a setup for failure.
Dude,
I'm serious, man.
I'm getting a little bit better about this. I actually made a list of things I wanted to do this morning last night, and I didn't even look at the list this morning. But I got all of them done. Sometimes just writing it down is enough for your brain to kind of just intuitively grasp what you need to do, even if you don't look at it.
Yeah, and I think it depends too, which type of ADHD you have as well, whether it's I or H or both, depending on how that manifests.
Absolutely, and not even just the type, but also just the person and how it works with them.
Exactly.
not everybody, like, some people might not even need a to-do list, but I definitely need, like, it definitely helps me get a grasp on what I need to get done. And I definitely get more done if I just sit down and make just a couple steps, because otherwise the first step can seem intimidating because I don't really know what it is.
Great point. That's a huge point.
You know what I mean?
Say that again. First step can seem intimidating.
The first, if you haven't just sat down and given yourself the first couple steps, actually getting that started can be intimidating.
That'll shut me down. An overwhelming first step, even when it turns out to be 14 seconds of off and on labor.
You and me were talking about this actually the other day, and it's interesting because there's so many things about ADHD that I relate to looking at it through a CPTSD lens, and we'll get into that later, but it's just so interesting when I hear you guys talk about it, the things that I do relate to.
We'll get into that too, because people with ADHD tend to bridge into PTSD as well, for a couple reasons that I'm going to bring up.
Yep.
And we'll get to that in a second, but my grandma would say once begun is half done. So if you can get that first step going, if you know what the first couple steps are, your brain will take care of the rest. If you can get started, sometimes
certainly got a much better shot at getting it done if you start it.
Yeah. So I want to make this abundantly clear. We are not lazy. There are a lot of people.
You can be lazy and
you can be lazy. You can be lazy. I don't
like the idea of the term lazy.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get
exactly.
That.
I agree. That's what I'm trying to say.
That can be a conversation for another day.
Yeah, you can be lazy. I mean, like, that just happens. But
I don't believe in laziness. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That's how I feel.
You can probably convince me on that one.
Actually, yeah, you can probably convince me too, to be honest. But I was kind of playing off of what Bill said. But my point is that a lot of people will just think their child is lazy, because what's really going on is this is a toxic belief perpetuated by ignorant people.
Society, you know.
Yeah, if we aren't accomplishing things, it's because we get lost in our brains, which work against us half the time sorry, this sentence wasn't complete. We live with an itch for okay, so we get lost in our brains, which work against us half the time in ways that we might not even understand.
And I think too, like, living in and this is just going back to the laziness thing, living in a capitalistic society like we do, in which we're, constantly indoctrinated to work, make money. Like, and if we're not working, we're lazy or we're doing something wrong. Like, you go to other countries and they don't look at things the way that we do. Like, we
here in America, anyway.
Yeah, like, we live to work basically, and other people, well, no, whatever the saying is, like, our lives are based around our jobs a lot of the times.
For an industrialized nation, we have the longest work week in the world.
Yeah, and to be honest, capitalism is all over the place. It's not just in America, but it's definitely bad over here.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's tied to capitalism, but it's definitely tied to our framework of our society.
Yeah,
definitely. But my point is that we live with an itch. So the reason why we might seem lazy on the outside is because we live with this itch for stimulation that is pervasive, and our minds will do whatever they possibly can to seek out stimulation and avoid feeling bored. So if we can get an easy, fun way to get our brains out of that boredom space, we're going to hitch onto that like a caboose on a train, and just, do what we can to avoid being bored. And that's going to take us wherever it takes us if we don't have a plan or something or intentions to do something that day, for instance. You following me?
Yeah.
That face doesn't say yes.
I'm thinking about it in two contexts. So you just kind of, the way I took your analogy or your example there was, it was a day when I didn't have to be at work. So the work experience of ADHD is much different for me than the home experience of ADHD. Because I have things I have to complete at work. At home, I don't. I can let things go from one project to the other, to the other, to the other, and that's okay. But at work, I can't do that forever, right?
Yeah.
I mean, 5 years of running, but I don't think it'll go forever.
So some people will think we're lazy because our brain gets distracted and we suddenly have all of our attention invested in something that isn't what we're doing. And then they're like, why didn't you just get it done? You know? And to those people, I just want to say, you got to look a little deeper in whoever it is that has this, whoever it is you're calling lazy. You got to think twice, because they might be struggling with something that you are not aware of. I'm very passionate about people understanding one another with mental illness, especially because that can go unseen. And that's the most terrifying thing for the person with it. Moving on to basically ADHDers. ADHD is a superpower for creativity. And we have a creative appetite. Even when awake, we're dreaming. We tap into creative neural pathways in our brain without even realizing it, which both empowers and distracts us. We will actualize our potential if we are handled with understanding, and then we can use that superpower for our advantage. Trouble is that repeated feelings of past failure can make our inner critics very loud, and we may hate our creations and give up only to rediscover their beauty at a time when the critic is quiet.
I don't know that I agreed with all that.
All right.
What was the first part again?
ADHD is a superpower for creativity.
Keep going.
We have a creative appetite, and even when awake, we're dreaming.
Yeah.
We tap into creative neural pathways in our brain without even realizing it, which both empowers and distracts us. We will actualize our potential if handled with understanding.
There you go. I don't want anyone else's understanding to be dependent on me actualizing my abilities. Does that make sense? That's what I didn't agree with.
We will
I think it makes things a lot easier for people, but that's not going to be a blockade for me.
Okay, so what I was trying to say was that it can't be a blockade, but being handled with understanding can help us.
Absolutely, 100%
along that route. That's what I was trying to get at.
Yep.
So the whole inner critic thing, we'll get into that in a minute. It is helpful to think of ADHD as a blessing and a curse. The condition allows for deep, beautiful creativity and also deep, depressive brooding. The tortured artist archetype is about to make a whole lot more sense, basically. So
brooding.
Mm-hmm. And I'm about to bridge into the science of how this works. Y'all ready?
All right, science it up.
It's helpful to think of ADHD as having a shoulder angel and demon. The demon is both the blessing, but the demon is both a blessing and a curse. And let me explain. So, the science of the dark and the light, the TPN and the DMN. So, these are two neural pathways in your brain that I'm going to explain. Scientists have studied the brains of neurotypical people and people with ADHD using MRIs and discovered important distinctions between the two. When humans engage in activities, neurons form together into networks. There are two important networks of neurons when discussing ADHD. There's the task positive network, or the TPN, which lights up when one is deeply engaged in a task, and the default mode network, or the DMN, which lights up when one is in a state of unfocused reflection and ideation, daydreaming and wondering. So in short, the TPN is lights up when you're focused, and the DMN lights up when you're unfocused. Essentially, the DMN, the unfocused state is not a negative state. It can be both positive and negative. In a neurotypical brain, am I going too fast?
No.
Okay. In a neurotypical brain, when the TPN is engaged, the DMN turns off. In other words, in a neurotypical brain can turn off the DMN, the distractive ideation.
That sounds like a flow state kind of a thing.
So that goes into the hyperfixation of ADHD, yes?
Kind of, actually, yeah. It's
That's why it's so hard just from my understanding, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but that to me sounds like when the hyperfixation occurs, it's a lot harder to become distracted, and there's a lot less opportunities for people to become distracted. That's why when you do become distracted in a hyperfixated state, it really throws you off kilter and off balance. Does that sound accurate, or?
It makes sense. Get distracted in a hyperfixative state. Yeah, it definitely does. That makes sense. It actually kind of plays into what I'm about to say.
Okay, cool.
It's perfect. But where was I? Right.
Perfect.
In an ADHD brain. So in a neurotypical brain, the TPN, when the TPN is engaged, the DMN is turned off. In an ADHD brain, the DMN remains on even when the TPN is engaged. It's always on.
Got it. Okay.
So the potential to become distracted and slip into a daydream and start ideating or coming up with ideas is always there for people with ADHD.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes more sense.
In fact, that's why we'll remember to do everything except what we sat down to do. That's why we'll slip into intrusive negative thoughts or an interesting idea or daydream instead of staying on task. It could be either one.
So now my brain is starting to piece together the similarities between ADHD and CPTSD. Continue.
Good. I'm excited to hear your thoughts on that. So this is also why we are capable of great creativity and great brooding. The DMN's reflective capabilities can bring up uncomfortable memories that can... The DMN's reflective capabilities can bring up uncomfortable memories, then give us ideas about them and make us wonder about them endlessly. Because we can't turn it off.
Everybody doesn't do that?
Everyone can engage this part of their brain. But ADHDers can't turn it off. So that's why we're so much more likely to fall into situations like this.
Okay.
Basically, it's why we can fall into endless brooding, but it's also why we can get obsessed with wonderful ideas and never stop creating. Because we can't turn it off. It's a blessing and a curse. We brood, we create. We brood, we create. We often hate what we create because we see how wonderful it could be at its full potential and are frustrated that it's not perfect yet, only to walk away from it and rediscover its beauty later when our DMN is not clogged with negativity.
So then how do stimulants play a part in that? Do we know?
That's a good question. I didn't research that topic specifically, but I can imagine it helps. I can imagine it helps stabilize the relationship between those two networks.
Okay.
In some way. So yeah, I was
just curious. So if anybody knows, you can let us know in the comments.
Absolutely. So in short, the TPN is the task positive network. The DMN is the default mode network, and the DMN is responsible for reflecting, creating, and also brooding. And ADHDers can't turn it off, which is why we get so distracted.
Nathan, this was really good stuff, but I gotta have a full stop and just say one time, can we just have the Office Space reference the TPN report? I'm gonna need your TPN report. And we can carry on. Just anyone.
Honestly, that kind of fits.
No, I was gonna say, you talk to another person with ADHD. I need your TPN. Come on, we need to get this done.
Hey, that's true. That's a really good parallel. That's funny.
That's awesome. All right, so that's my science. We're about to dive deep in. We're about to dive a little deeper and do our freeform.
Can we? Can we have the name for the episode? I'm gonna need your TPN report.
Yeah, okay. I think
that's going to be like the subtitle.
I think that'd be awesome.
For sure. Here's your TPN report, everybody tuning in. But I'm going to work through these following points gradually and let it fuel our freeform discussion. First one. Our DMN has lots of depressive fuel to work with because our condition causes us to be late and underperform creating a vast history of memories where we felt like we were a disappointment, a failure, or inadequate. If we are not taught that our perceived failures are a byproduct of our greatest strengths and are instead shamed for them by our caretakers, these feelings can be compounded and leave us brooding when we could be creating.
Not my experience.
Not your experience.
Mm-mm.
What is your experience?
Growing up, because I think that was a kind of a childhood thing. It wasn't, you need to focus. It was, he's nuts, man.
He's nuts.
He's just hyperactive.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Well,
my point is, my memory is not the best, but I don't think that I have these things that I go back to and think of failures and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's a different experience for every individual too, and I think it depends
possible.
on the environment in which you were in.
It has to,
because a lot of times when like teachers or parents or whatever like see these really like hyperactive children that they can't necessarily control, they will then see that as a fault of the child rather than like a ding ding ding.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. In other words,
I think that's kind of leaning on the point of Nathan, where they experience that kind of.
I think your point is incredibly valid. Absolutely, 100%. It's just not my experience.
Yeah, it's just not your personal experience, which I think is an important one to uplift because not everybody has the same.
I was going to say, I'm so glad that was your first reaction because this is just what tends to happen.
Yeah,
for people like me who are, I guess. I don't know if my inclination towards sensitivity and that sort of thing kind of makes me more susceptible to this. I'm not sure what it could be, but this is definitely my experience in the sense that I know that my upbringing was, like for the most part, it was pretty understanding filled, but I have lots of memories of just, I have trauma associated with not being on time because it happens to me all the time. And so I have an enormous amount of anxiety when I'm late. And it just overwrites my cognition. And I'm just like, you're late. This is a problem. Like that's just programmed into me. And so I'm like, and really it's, I was bullied for it too in high school. So that didn't help. But no, it was like
interesting. So it seems to me as if this, we might be doing therapy here, but that's fine. It seems as if this, fear of being late because it was such a like experience when you were young. Yes.
Yes.
So that was really kind of laid down for you at an early age. So that feeling is really imprinted in you as, young Nathan. And that's a lot of where those emotions seem like they're coming from for you when you are late now in adulthood. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Would that pan out? So you're having these like big reactions because that's kind of like where it came from in that time in your life.
And it continues to happen. It continues to happen to this day because my frontal lobe that's one thing I want to make clear about ADHD as well. Our frontal lobes take longer to develop than the average person. And as a result, and that's the part of your brain that's associated with planning and thinking ahead and making connections. Is
that executive function?
Executive function, exactly.
And I think too, like, and going off of that, thank you for mentioning that, because that goes into another point, is if you're operating, like if this fear of being late is operating from a limbic system response, like a fear center in your brain, you're not going to have access to your frontal lobe anyways, because that turns off when you have that fear response. Good
point.
Yep. So
that's why, like, I think, that's a really good point of how, individuals who are neurotypical, like, don't understand this, because individuals who are kind of neurodivergent, they experience a lot of this kind of, developmental trauma because their brains aren't working, normally or the same as individuals who are, neurotypical. And so they experience that kind of like stigma or those microaggressions or that kind of like discrimination. And it lays down that foundation when they're young to have those limbic system responses. So when they are older, it's even harder to function because you've dealt with a lifetime full of, that stuff.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Absolutely. And a point that this can lead into is that because our executive function develops slower than the average person, I don't know the numbers exactly, but I know that like people with ADHD, their executive function is still developing until the ages of like 35 to 36.
Wow.
So it's, it takes a while. So that's why they talk about the executive function age of ADHD people, which is significantly lower than your actual age, which is why every single one of my best friends is younger than me. Like, I don't know if it's necessarily because of this, but it's my theory is that I just can relate to somebody whose brain is closer to mine in terms of developmental speed.
I wish I understood that at all, but I don't. I mean,
I think it's probably
I'm sitting
also
here with two 20-something-year-olds, so
yeah,
I'm guilty of that. I mean, you know this, where I spend my time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's just
not with grown-ups. Not that you guys aren't grown-ups. You're
I
still,
don't feel like a grown-up.
You're still developing up
Bill
here.
called me a teenager a couple weeks ago.
I did. You're welcome.
He's like, you teenagers. I'm just like, oh my God. I'm just like, maybe mentally sometimes, but like basically, yeah. That's been a great conversation. Thank you for opening up and saying that was where the differences were.
Here, you can edit this out, but Nathan, you grew up in an incredibly driven, successful type family environment too.
Yeah.
So dealing with the things you were dealing with made that unimaginably worse in my imagination, at least.
Mm-hmm.
In my reality, yes.
Okay.
No, it's true. I'm the only one of my brothers and sisters that has ADHD, PTSD, and possibly bipolar disorder. Figuring everything out. Not sure if it's PTSD or bipolar. Still figuring out, like, for sure. I have been diagnosed bipolar, but still figuring out for sure if it's, triggers or mood swings. You know what I mean?
And that's a long journey.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's very true.
Which is interesting that you say that.
There's a lot of pressure. I grew up with a lot of pressure.
There you go.
Yeah. Which is interesting that you say that, because that was my original diagnosis as well, as ADHD.
Yeah.
And then they said, you don't have ADHD, you're bipolar. And then they said, you're not actually bipolar, you have CPTSD. So
yeah,
it is definitely a journey of, figuring out and finding the, care team that is going to look at everything.
Absolutely.
I think it was actually the ACE test that differentiated it for.
Yeah. That's
the ACE test.
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
The Adverse Childhood Experiences test.
Okay. Maybe I should take that. I would probably be informative. Is this
it is
7?
Yeah, that's mine.
That's my prediction.
So actually I think mine's 8. Now
Yours
that I
gotta
went
be
back
at
and
least
took it
8.
again. But
can you just take it online?
It's just an adverse childhood experience quiz. It is essentially, they give you 10 questions about what you had experienced before the age of 18, like violence in the household, sexual abuse, things like that.
Divorce, death of a parent.
Divorce, death of a loved one. If a loved one was incarcerated, things like that. And then they say that depending on your ACE score, you'll have, these specific outcomes, but you're not destined for it. But it just helps put into perspective physical health outcomes in the future. And that's why it was developed.
So really quickly, when we talk about diagnoses, I don't really care what my diagnosis is. I just care if the results I'm getting are, adequate.
Yeah, I think, like, for me, where I've landed is that the diagnosis I had at the time was that I had them were really beneficial for me at the time because they gave me the answers that I needed for what I was experiencing.
Good point.
And I think from a medication standpoint, the medication that I was taking, like when I was diagnosed with ADHD, when you are ADHD and you take a stimulant, it kind of levels you out. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you have CPTSD and you take a stimulant, a whole other myriad of shit occurs, and at least in my experience, it made my brain catch on fire, and I was just like an angry asshole who was like yelling at everybody, and I didn't eat for like 3 weeks.
clearly wasn't for you.
Right. And so, but then when I got my bipolar diagnosis, that felt like it fit me, and I took mood stabilizers, which helped me level out because my CPTSD was very, active at the time.
Yeah.
And it helped stabilize me. So, I think that, it's all about where you're at in your journey, but I think that, it's just, you have to try a bunch of things that work for you.
Yeah.
And that's the difficult thing about ADHD that, you guys experience is that, sometimes it's hard to take that initial first step to, at least
it is for me.
Yeah. From people that I've talked to
very hard
who
for
struggle
me.
with it. It's hard to even pick up the phone and make a phone call to the doctor's appointment. I mean, it's difficult for me to even because I have that executive dysfunction thing as well sometimes.
No, I could make appointments for you 6 months out today if you wanted me to. No problem with that. But yeah.
Yeah, that's shoot, what was I going to say? Right. So, one of the things I talked about with my therapist, or no, it was my psychiatrist, maybe both. But they mentioned that I take lithium, which is a mood stabilizer, and and I was like, well, maybe if I have bipolar disorder, wouldn't that be, wouldn't that make sense that it would help with that? And he said, well, mood stabilizers help with PTSD as well.
Yep. And
then I was like, oh, that makes sense because the PTSD would trigger you into a mood that would need to be stabilized. So it's
basically the way that it works, at least it worked for me, was that when we struggle with PTSD or CPTSD, your baseline, here's where everyone else's baseline is. Our baseline is up here, right?
Yeah.
So what
baseline for what?
For just functioning, just our functioning baseline. So this is where a person's normal emotions and our feelings are at on a daily basis is just kind of chill. Right. We'll just say it's just chill. Us is just up here, very reactive, very just hyper aware, hyper vigilant is where we're operating at. So for me, what a mood stabilizer did was take me from functioning up here to a little bit down here so that when I would have triggers or I would have things that would enact a mood, that it would be a lot less powerful than it normally would. Yeah. Right. I'd be a lot less reactive or hypervigilant than I normally would.
And I'll bet that really helped with whatever you were trying to focus on.
Yep.
Instead of the mood pulling you away from it.
So a lot of times I like to use rodents and examples. And
okay. That's
so
fair.
Hamsters levels. If I'm looking, and I love hamsters, and if I had a cage with hamsters and I had 2 hamsters, one of them's going to be asleep, under those little wood shavings, about 90% of the time. And then one of them's going to be on that wheel 90% of the time, waiting for something else to do. So I stick some food in there and I'm like, food, Meryl, back to the wheel, while the other one's sleeping.
Yeah.
That's their basic resting levels.
Yeah.
Okay, I get that. I'm on my wheel.
Yeah.
So I had a friend of mine, I thought this was actually fantastically and incredibly intelligent. She said, sometimes I need to be treated like a gerbil. I need to be told it's time to eat. I need to be told it's time to play. I need to be told it's time to sleep. I'm like, I totally get that. Yeah.
The gerbil. That makes
I need to be treated like a gerbil.
That is a very interesting. Yeah, that's a great image because
but it made sense, and and that she was right.
And I do want to reiterate too for everybody that's listening, don't ever self-diagnose, right? We want to make sure that you're talking to a care team, trained professionals. You're really giving them full history of, what you're going through, what you're experiencing, and just kind of use this episode as a guide for what you can potentially bring up or, put into perspective for yourself, because everybody's experience is extremely different. No 2 people look exactly the same symptomatically, even if they were raised exactly the same right next to each other. It's just all about your journey and what you feel is right for you. So I think that's really important to put into perspective for yourself.
Absolutely, positively. I think that, yes, you should, if you have a suspicion that you might have a certain mental illness, bring it up with a trained professional that you trust, that you vibe with. Yeah. Make sure it's not with somebody that, is going to not listen to you.
Well, make it a behavioral health professional.
Yeah. Don't obviously go to Reddit or YouTube for advice because you don't know if those are,
Go there for suggestions.
Verified or accurate. Yeah, go there for suggestions and coping tools and coping tactics and, resources for sure.
There's a lot to be said for that. And I'm not going to speak for you, but you might want to talk about your experience of finding community online.
Yeah, which is true. Yeah, there is a lot of community online, a lot of support groups, a lot of, things that you can lean on and reach out too.
Well, you know what? I guess if someone were watching this, they're already kind of going down that road. So.
Yeah.
Good job.
So I think it's definitely important. And we are aware and understanding of the fact that accessibility isn't always, a thing that people have, right? Therapy isn't always affordable. Medication isn't always affordable. Psychiatrist is really hard to get into. Sometimes they schedule you like months, half a year, 2 years. It really just depends on the area in which you're in and what you're struggling with.
Did you make that up? 2 years?
No, I know somebody in a rural area that had to wait 2 years for a psychiatrist.
Rural area.
Yeah.
2 years. Mm-hmm. Oh, that is such a
because there was
problem.
there was only
pisses me off.
Yeah, there's only like a few psychiatrists that actually lived in their area, unless they wanted, which they ended up driving like an hour and a half to a city to go see a psychiatrist. So
that's someone's life.
Yeah, but like if you don't have a car, right? And then a lot of times in rural areas, they don't have buses. Busing. Mm-mm. So sometimes it can be really difficult. So that's something that's, we understand. We want to put that into perspective and, do what you got to do for yourself.
Yeah. No, it's still a problem. I mean, the wait list, especially now, ever since COVID, I feel like it's just exploded. But 6 months, 8 months.
But COVID is great though because of the telehealth.
There you go.
The telehealth. There's advantages. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I think telehealth is one of the beautiful things that came out of COVID.
Yes.
And I'm hoping that continues on the same trajectory. I think that it's kind of here to stay.
Me too.
Because I think even, clinicians really appreciate it.
Yep.
As well.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that we continue on and that is, a feasible resource for people. And then I also just want to say, don't use BetterHelp. Thank you.
What's that? So if you don't know, we don't need to say what it is.
Well, no, honestly, if you do what you want, do BetterHelp if you want, it doesn't really matter. But BetterHelp is an online therapy service and they sell your data to things like Facebook and other advertisers, even conversations that you have in there. Yeah.
Is wrong.
Yeah. And they're able to do that because of the terms of service that you signed up for. So don't use BetterHelp.
Like if it's data that's going to help improve our app or whatever, I can kind of understand that. But personal therapy sessions?
From what my understanding is, that's my understanding. Do your own research, obviously. I don't want to be here saying like, F BetterHelp. Like, just do your own research and make your own educated opinion.
PSA.
That's what I always like to say.
PSA.
Is formulate your own opinion. Don't take my word for it.
Got you.
But that's my stance. Take it or leave.
Nice stance. And also anyways,
back to our regularly scheduling program.
The difficulty thing also bleeds. I just wanted to say that. Let's talk a second about the Adderall shortage.
Oh my gosh. I feel so fucking bad for people. Like, it just really like irritates the fuck out of me. Like, I know one of my friends had to go to like 3 or 4 different pharmacies, right? And it's like, how do you expect people, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, but how do you expect...
Makes it a million times harder.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Like, you guys are already struggling.
Here's my experience. I didn't have it for 5 days. I got it because someone I work with called every fucking pharmacy in town until they found it. I didn't even do that. They did that for me.
Yeah, because it's hard.
There's a national Adderall shortage right now, and people with ADHD are suffering because of it.
Yeah, and when you're already struggling with executive dysfunction, picking up the phone and making a phone call, literally, from my understanding, from what people have told me, and from, all the TikToks that I've watched, people, being upset about it, is like, that's the hardest thing to do. I mean, I know for me, when I'm really struggling mental health wise and like anxiety wise, and like I'm in a really bad depressive episode, like the hardest thing for me to fucking do is pick up the phone or text someone back or even get out of fucking bed. Yep. So like, I can't even imagine. And it just like really breaks my heart and it pisses me off and it makes me so upset.
Dude, I remember, Bill, when I texted you, I was just like, I just got Adderall from Kroger. Go, 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 go. Get it while you can. And then he was able to get it, and I was so happy.
Well, and actually, I got it before that.
Okay.
On the other side of town.
Oh, okay, good. Well, yeah. So that's just another thing that's been difficult for people who are neurodivergent lately. But moving on to some other talking points. Unsurprisingly, ADHDers have a high tendency to develop addictions. 5 to 10 times more likely because we have an itch to juice up our reality and get some stimulation.
That's such a freaking widespread. I have no confidence in science. 5 to 10 times, really?
Yeah, I mean...
No. I mean, I'm not saying that's not correct, but narrow it fucking down. That's a huge range.
You know,
what I
that's
mean?
a really good
5
point.
to 10,
I just wrote down what I researched, but you've got a good point.
That is a big window.
It literally doubles the size of the sample.
5 to 10.
Definitely.
Yeah,
I
but
think too,
regardless, it's big.
Yeah, I think too, it's difficult because people use, substances and alcohol to self-medicate, and a lot of times
It's not reported.
what we don't see is that like these individuals may be struggling with a mental health issue and using this thing to self-medicate and not realizing that they're using it to self-medicate.
Oh,
but they're
hell
like,
yeah.
oh wow, I feel really, really good on this thing or this thing. And in reality, like, it's symptom management for them.
Absolutely. Very
And
true.
that's why we shouldn't stigmatize addiction. Period. Sorry, just
Mic drop.
Just an aside.
Mic drop. Well said.
I mean, shit, it was self-medication for me.
Yeah, no, I think it's easy to lean on when you have a mental disability or that is going to make you swing so far one way mood wise that you feel like you have no other option.
Because some people don't. Like, some people genuinely don't feel like they have another option. They don't realize there's another option available for them. Like, for me, I was really young, very stigmatizing households where mental health wasn't existing. I was struggling with my trauma. So the only thing I could think to do was get drunk because it quieted all of the noise in my brain.
Yeah.
And it helped me calm down the symptoms that I was experiencing.
At that age, you didn't have any paradigm for what self-medication was. You just knew it made you better.
I just knew it. It made me not want to,
Exactly. My dad did the same thing. He identifies as an alcoholic and he also has ADHD. So, it's a thing.
Yeah.
Even if that window is huge, the point is that.
Oh, I think your point's incredibly valid.
Yeah.
I'm
the
just
point
mad
is that it's
people
big.
that did the research.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think that's too big of a window.
I think maybe the book I was reading at the time may have been this might have developed further. Who knows?
Yeah. Do you know what year that book was?
That's a good question. I will get into that after this next point.
Because that would be really interesting to see is what year that was printed.
Right. Yeah. I can, if we have time at the end, I'll Google it.
Okay, cool.
So our plethora of negative memories can cause us to develop what's called rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or RSD, where we become afraid others will reject us because we're used to disappointing people or used to feeling like we're being like we're disappointment. Yeah.
Which is not just ADHD specific.
It's not just ADHD specific, but it's something associated with ADHD.
That you see very often.
Yes. We can also develop RSD's counterpart, rejection sensitive euphoria, which is RSE, which is a rush of healing emotions that we get when we feel the opposite of rejection, an intense rush of just euphoric feelings because
I may get that too.
Because it hits, we feel the opposite, and it hits hard because we're used to the other side.
Like when somebody gives us validation, it's
when someone gives us validation or says they believe in us or says something,
why
something
is that called rejection sensitive euphoria? Shouldn't it be called something like
it might be
validation euphoria?
It's like I know it's rejection is in the name. I might actually have this one wrong. I'll have to double check it, but I know that it's
it's probably absolutely right. I'm just,
that's a good point though.
But I mean, it's the same thing like with ADHD. Like, it's not a deficit of attention either.
I think it could be like
it's misdirected.
It could be like validation sensitive euphoria because that would make a lot of sense because when it hits like that it would make sense. Like I agree. I think that's a great name for it. But no, I definitely experienced that.
Clarify what that was because I was a little confused.
I definitely experienced both. I actually for the longest time felt like my brain would just tell me everyone that all my friends that I've grown up with or just anyone that they don't like me and don't want to spend time around me and they would reject me. And I'd fear that. And the more I like discover my own sort of this extremist in my mind that kind of puts these things in my head. I realize I engage with someone who I thought might have rejected me and they're just happy to see me and happy to talk to me. And I'm like, dude, Like, this is just, it's something, that fear is just developed from traumatic experiences on my past. It's not necessarily the case.
Yeah.
And
now I don't know that my experience with that has to do with ADHD, but what really helps me is looking at facts.
Yeah. And I always say too, like I tell people this all the time, and I have to tell myself this every single day, is don't assume somebody has a problem with you, because it's their responsibility to tell you when they're upset with you, when they have a problem with you. You can't just assume that person does. Yeah. Especially individuals who experienced trauma when they were younger, probably hypervigilant and hyper attuned to others' emotions, which is why it's really important for me to ground myself in if they didn't tell me they have an issue, they don't have an issue. I have to just assume they don't have a problem with me and go about my life, because I literally beat myself up over assumed stuff.
Exactly.
Like over assumed situations that aren't even true.
Not true, dude.
Yeah.
That I get to see that all the time. And that's why I'll literally say to myself, what are the facts? What are the facts?
Yeah, what are the facts? Man, this is a great little mantra. Right there. So yeah, this one is pretty interesting. We have trouble observing our roles in problems and may end up blaming others for things. I suspect this is because we feel we feel that we've had enough. It's only like we've had enough. We've had enough dealing. Like I often feel like I get frustrated with having to deal with being neurodivergent, and so I have trouble. Sometimes I'll have trouble realizing when that frustration becomes a problem. If you know what I mean. It's like, it's only natural if you're sitting with a library of misery on your head. How could you be at fault with everything you've been through? And then our DMN spits out tons of grievances at once, and we can blow up at people, which that's one of the biggest reasons why my dad and I couldn't connect when I was growing up, because he would do that. That would happen between us constantly, because it was coming from both sides, because we both have ADHD and we both had no idea. It's
I wanted to ask, what is your guys' experience with overstimulation?
Overstimulation.
Yeah. Do you guys experience that at all?
What does that mean?
I feel numb.
When there's too much sensory input at one time.
I don't think I have a problem with that. But I know what you're talking about, because I see it a lot. But I'm not sure I understand your question, so let me tell you what I'm thinking.
Okay.
So a lot of times I'll watch TV while I'm reading something, while I'm playing a game on my phone. And an hour's gone by, and I'll watch the same 2 episodes again, because I didn't understand a word the first time. And then I will have to do it again.
Yep.
I mean, literally, I'm doing 3 or 4 things at the same time.
So overstimulation means it's like you just can't stay on task. Like, it's just you know what I mean? It's like
overstimulation is when you are taking in too many sensory inputs at once, and it is too overstimulating for your body to handle, and you freak the fuck out.
Nope, don't do that. But I've seen it.
Yeah,
I've seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I do. I don't think I freak the fuck out, but I have gotten to the point where I've been scrolling through Instagram, or just doom scrolling, or reading Twitter or Reddit or something, and then I had no plan for the day to begin with, and then before I know it, it's been hours of me just absorbing things. Yeah. And then I just feel numb inside. There's just nothing. There's no point. I don't know what to do with myself. So I don't know if that's overstimulation or oversaturation, or what you would call it.
Yeah, I don't know what the term would be for that.
But I do experience that. And then
the reason why I was asking that question is because your interaction with your dad sounded to me like you were both getting overstimulated with one another, but that may have been off base.
I think that
because that's the only knowledge that I have, right? It's my own personal experience.
Yeah. From the most, that would make sense. From the most part, I think it was both of us would just get frustrated with our own inability to make progress. And so when the other, in his position in particular, he would see when I would stop making progress, and I would, I'd go into ADHD perceivably lazy mode in the sense that, like, I wasn't getting anything done, but I was actually just stuck in my head, and he would blow up at me for that. And then I would fight back because neither of us knew how to understand that there's a plethora of information and, negative experiences that our brain can slip into at any given moment. And in those positions, we become unable to function normally. And then it's frustrating. It was frustrating for him to see me like that because it would remind him of like how he used to be.
Okay.
So it was kind of more from that angle.
Got it. Okay. I'm picking up what you're putting down now.
All right. Bet. So we're almost done. Distorted negative self-image. Oh. This one is interesting. We often have the inability to observe. The inability to observe our own issue, our own position in a problem, plus rejection sensitivity dysphoria, plus the onslaught of underachievement. This leads to low self-esteem, which makes it harder to see through our DMN. Then we suffer shame when this causes us to misinterpret our peers' responses to us as rejections or even attacks. So someone with ADHD might read into somebody else's words attacks that do not exist because they are expecting them, or in other words, trained to look for them in a way that's toxic to themselves.
That's an ADHD thing?
It's a thing that is common with ADHD.
Okay.
It can happen
I think that probably comes from, because I feel that way a lot of my life.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
And
I just never attributed it to ADHD.
Yeah.
It's just a thing. It's again, this is very likely to happen with people
It's like
with
a
ADHD.
co-occurring disorder.
More or less. Yeah. It's
co-occurring
like
symptom.
Yeah. But when I think about that, I think about it could be a result of a lot of different experiences.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not necessarily just
Sucks
experiences.
however you get there. But,
but it's not necessarily it's just, I guess what it's saying here is,
well, you said it right. It's very common.
It's very common among people with ADHD, and therefore it creates the higher probability of experiencing it. So that's an interesting one because I have experienced that from both sides. Like I said, I would read into people's words and think that they didn't like me, and would, that was part of that whole thing that I just expressed. So, and what do you know? Like, they actually, want to hang out with me, and they don't care about those things.
Yeah. I'm wondering if that comes from your experience as a child, trying to function with an ADHD brain in a hyper competitive atmosphere.
Yeah. It was definitely hyper competitive. Yeah.
And I mean, even in public schools and even private institutions, having that type of pressure that just you being yourself is wrong.
Yeah.
It sounds like it could play into that.
Yeah. Yep.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Because I experienced that as well when I was a kid, because I was an energetic child. And I would sing, and I would dance, and I would cry, and I was just full of emotion. And I was slowly kind of withered away from that kind of emotion, so much so because it made the people around me very uncomfortable because they were, emotionally dysregulated and didn't know how to regulate me.
Yeah.
And so emotion's bad. And so as I grew up, that kind of stayed with me and kind of led into that, because the people around me didn't necessarily vocalize that they would be upset with me. They would, be upset around me and expect me to know. I think that kind of plays into, my personal experience with thinking people are angry with me even when they're not.
Yeah. Your experiences with your childhood. Yeah. You were definitely trained to expect that kind of thing. It's it's not necessarily, it really is not necessarily an ADHD thing. I think it's a trauma thing as well.
And I mean, there is a certain amount of trauma that you experience being a neurodivergent child in a neurotypical society. I mean, there's just stuff that comes with that. That's why you see what I have seen lately among individuals who experience autism is that they also have a co-occurring complex post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosis because of the fact that, you know, they are treated so differently at their developmental ages and are kind of like told, you know, you as a person do not fit in this specific environment.
Yeah.
And I think that goes kind of across the board with individuals who struggle with their mental health, especially in childhood, because we are, you know, set to a specific standard in schools and in society, and being different than that gets us, you know, stigmatized and talked down to. And it's really difficult, and it's a really hard thing.
Yeah, it's a real hard thing. I got like notes from doctors to get like extra time on tests, like constantly, like growing up, because I really needed it. You know,
like,
and
that's okay. Like, and I think that, you know, it's really difficult for me because I don't think that our system that is current works very well.
There you go. Thank you.
You know? And I think that
there's a strict standard.
Yeah, it's like trying to set us up to be, you know, little army soldier, I think down the line, you know, little boxes on the hillside, you know, kind
join
of thing.
a business, get good health care.
I think it's the easiest, most cost-effective way to try to educate as many people as possible. And what we don't do is take into account that there are many, many different ways of learning.
Right. There are many different learning styles.
So I think the instances of childhood ADHD will go down dramatically once we learn how to meet people where they are, starting in preschool all the way through high school. And I think we're headed that direction.
And I think
I'm optimistic about that as well.
Yeah, and I wanted to highlight too something that you just said to like bring a light bulb in my brain, is that a lot of times children who struggle at home and who are dealing with childhood trauma are oftentimes misdiagnosed ADHD, because a lot of times their hypervigilance can be mistaken for hyperactivity.
Yeah.
That's why when we're looking at childhood development and childhood diagnosis, it's really important that we put trauma into perspective when it comes to that kind of thing.
Yep.
And a lot of times you can look at, does that hyperactivity come with anxiety, which is, you know, the hypervigilance. And, you know, if it does, a lot of times that means that, you
something's going on.
Something's going on. Not to say that those two things can't be happening at the same time, which they absolutely can. You know, genetics play a big part in ADHD. So it could be, you know,
it's still
both.
That child's brain's response is the same as if they were in that situation.
Yes.
So something needs to be changed.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's, you know, I'm hoping that the model of care for mental health is going more towards paying attention to that kind of thing, and that we can get more, you know, licensed counselors in schools and, you know, things like that. So we can really take care of, be proactive about mental health and really take care of children and meet them where they're at and really, you know, help it when it's going on rather than when it's too late.
Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely.
Except I don't really think that it's ever too late.
It's never,
But, you know, there is a point where neuroplasticity is a huge piece of childhood trauma.
I know you can't give me a scientific answer, but you're, you know, a lot closer to your school years than I am. You know, what if you guys had spent half an hour, 2 days a week on mindfulness or tools?
I probably would have used a lot less drugs and alcohol.
Yeah. I mean,
I probably would have been able to make a lot more friends.
Yeah. Well, because like I know that because of the fact that like as soon as I got out of high school, that's what I did. Like I jumped into researching about what was going on with me. And then I found a therapist that was trauma informed, because I would always say, man, I feel like I have PTSD from my childhood. Here it is. It's a whole ass thing, you know? And, and so like going out and finding that trauma informed therapist to sit me down and tell me like, yo, this is actually what you're experiencing was so fundamental in my healing process. And getting those coping tactics there in those therapy sessions changed my whole life and helped me, you know, disconnect myself from, you know, all of these substances that I was using to self-medicate. And I think it's interesting if you look at, the overlapping symptomology of both ADHD and CPTSD is they look very similar, which was why I was, misdiagnosed 2 other times before they realized I was I was CPTSD because, it hasn't really been around very long anyways.
Yeah. Neither has ADHD, to be honest.
Yeah. I think that it really kind of came into fruition around the time I was born, 1995, is when people really started looking at it. And correct me on that because I could be completely wrong, but I think that's my understanding of it.
Yeah.
So it's still a very early thing, and as you said, ADHD is. So I think parsing out all of the differences in the symptomatic nature of how these manifest, I think, are really important. And it's not it's not an either or, right? It can be a both and as well.
Both and either or. And
sometimes it can be, PTSD, CPTSD can be a result of being a child struggling with their mental health in a society that is discriminatory and stigmatizing.
Like, case in point, I remember when I learned I had PTSD, and I was just like, what?
From
then it's and then suddenly, like, once it was explained to me, I'm just like,
yeah, the pieces started falling together.
Oh.
That's kind of how it was for me. I mean, like...
That makes sense.
Right. Like, when I was going through my, I never really aligned with ADHD originally when I was diagnosed. But, now looking back, I understand why that was the natural diagnosis that I got at the time.
You just explained it.
Are we segueing into next time's episode about PTSD? Is that what's happening?
I mean, yeah, I think that'd be a great one to go into.
That would be a great one.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great one to go into.
Research that. All right. That'll be fun. Oh, that's a great idea. And
I don't think that sentence has ever been uttered. Research PTSD? That'll be fun.
Dude, I had a ton of fun researching ADHD. I was learning so much. It'll be fun to research. Research is fun. Having it is not, but researching it.
Yeah, no, I love researching stuff too. And I think it's important for us to differentiate next episode the difference between PTSD and CPTSD.
That is important.
Yeah,
You can nail that.
Yeah.
I got one more.
Go ahead, research as much as you want, and I'll flow off all of your research next time.
But yeah, I'll pick up a book. Cool. I got one more point.
All right. Bring it.
And it's going to end us on a little bit of a positive note, so it's good. Practicing self-awareness can help us ADHDers to be more gentle and patient with ourselves and ultimately unlock our full potential. After learning about all this, I've detected when my DMN goes dark multiple times. I've started to, after reading this and doing research, I can notice when I start to get into the dark zone of my DMN and I start to dwell and brood, and I'm like, it's happening, I can notice it. And I'm more able to carefully navigate through the soup of intense feelings that happens and figure out why. And then I opened up about this in therapy. The whole, I open up about those dark, when my brain goes dark, I think about why. And then I open up about those things in therapy, and my God, does it help? Like, it's just, that's when I was like, this is what therapy is all about. It's about unpacking that stuff that's uncomfortable and figuring out why, so you can understand. And instead of when that thought comes up and the spider web comes out, you can still be like, no, this is still where I need to go, instead of all of these ugly feelings.
And I think too, it's important, with me and dealing with my trauma, it's like I would hyper intellectualize all of my feelings. I would think about, why am I feeling this way? Where is it coming from? Like, I can literally, every feeling I have, I can pinpoint it to somewhere in my life or what's making me upset. What I need to start doing, and what I've been doing in my life as well, is the negative thought that I do have, or that internal negative dialogue that I have about myself or about maybe other people, is, I almost like gentle parent myself, right?
Gentle parent.
Like, I imagine like what you said, when you were a child, it was, hard for you to function. And so when I'm having those times that are hard for me to function, I offer myself grace and understanding. And I will literally sometimes even talk to myself like a child and say, it's okay, Amanda, you're just struggling today. Like, you're just having a really rough day, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Dude,
do what you need to do today.
It makes you
if what
feel
you need
so
to
good.
Right? Like, if what you need to do today is just lay in bed and like go to sleep or lay in bed and just do nothing, then that's what you need to do for a few hours, and that's okay. And normally after I talk to myself like that and I lay in bed for a few hours, normally I'm like, okay, this is boring. Like, let me get up and do something. And then like I start feeling better because I'm allowing myself to give myself the thing that I need. Because I'm an adult now and I have agency now. And who the fuck is anyone else to tell me what I'm supposed to be doing? I'm not in the business of doing anything I don't want to do anymore.
Exactly.
You used a really good word, grace. Very, very easy for me to give grace to other people. Very good practice to give grace to yourself.
Yeah, and imagining yourself as a small child, I think, is really important. That helps me.
Sure.
Because I'm not seeing myself as the person that I beat up all the time.
Because that when you want to go, you're a grown up, get the fuck out of bed.
Exactly. And then if I imagine myself as a child, I wouldn't talk to a child that way.
Right.
I wouldn't tell my child, you're a piece of shit, get the fuck up out of bed.
Gentle parenting.
I wouldn't say that to a kid, right? No.
Never.
I would say, take your time, sweetie, get up when you need to.
Gentle parenting.
Yeah. That's so great. I was practicing a song I want to perform yesterday, and I kept messing up the pronunciation of like two specific words, and I did exactly what you just did, which is like I calmed down. I was just like, it's like, all right, just take it slowly. You got this. And I nailed it. It was that easy to if you're kind to yourself, like it gave me so much more, like not just confidence, but just, I don't know what the word is, but I was able to execute without like, cause like what'll happen is if I'm performing something and I know I messed something up, my brain will start dwelling on that while I'm still trying to perform. And then I keep messing up more. But if I'm easy with myself, if I'm easy on myself and I just, and I work out the kinks instead of just being like, damn it, let me try it again. Like, and just being like, okay, let me work with myself. You can do this. It's okay. It's just, the level of improvement was just staggering.
Yeah, and I think, too, my internal voice is automatically negative and shaming because that's what I was, that's what I experienced growing up. And a lot of times our internal voices that we hear growing up become our internal voices that we have as adults.
Yes.
A lot of my parents are in my head and tell me things. Like when I hit my toe in the corner and I start crying, like my instant reaction is to call myself a dumbass. And it's just like, that's not nice.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say that to somebody else. So why am I going to talk to myself like that? And so like, and if I spill something, you're stupid, like I would talk to myself like that all the time.
Yeah.
And it's because I was talked to that way. And so now I'm like no longer letting that inner voice have that control, no longer letting those people have that control over me, and instead giving the control back to myself and allowing myself to cry it out. If I spill something and I'm upset about it, I'm going to fucking cry about it because I deserve to and I have the right to. And feeling your emotions is so vital to move through them and to process and to help them. The next time you feel that same emotion, it won't be as heavy.
That's a good word for it. That's what it feels like. It feels like a weight on your shoulders. And if you're able to talk with yourself and work with yourself, it definitely gets lighter.
And dude, it's hard. It's so hard because you're literally reprogramming. You're literally reprogramming your internal voice, and it's so hard. It's really difficult. And it's taken me a very, very long time. I still, sometimes regress back to, my old ways.
Me too.
Yeah, every day I get closer and closer and closer to hushing that negative voice.
Yeah, I don't know the answer. Tell me though that this is either right or wrong. I imagine that the key to that is consistency. Yeah, you keep doing it until you have the reaction that you want to have.
It will get easier and easier as you go, but it's a learning curve.
Yes.
Like and it can feel really steep at times. Like it's a muddy slope, but to be honest, it's not impossible because it does it helps. It can feel like it is, but it's just being nice, but being kind to yourself can just know that just being kind to yourself can make a huge difference. And it's hard to do it though. but like I said, learning curve.
I mean, even that thought stopping aspect of it is important. Like even when you notice, because sometimes it's hard to even notice that we're doing that, right?
Oh no, that's the whole reason why like my dad and I used to go at it, because we had no idea that that's what was happening to both of us.
Yeah.
Like,
and even like noticing that inner voice or that inner critic and saying out loud, stop. Like that's what I had to start doing.
Exactly.
In the beginning of it is like literally tell myself, stop.
Yeah.
Like, you're okay, Amanda. Like, don't let yourself get down this rabbit hole. Like, this is not you right now. This is somebody else speaking on behalf of you. This is not you.
Yeah. Fall
so
into the demon, the DMN.
Yeah,
fall
even
into the
saying
demon.
that out loud is really, really helpful.
Absolutely.
All right.
Any final thoughts,
TPM
guys?
reports.
TPM reports? You need TPM report? Okay, hold on.
I think this was a really great episode, y'all.
Dude, good job on the research.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
I feel like I really did. I feel like I learned a lot today about the people around me, because a lot of the people around me are ADHD.
Yeah.
Us.
Or they're people living with ADHD. I don't know. It's just your verbs, your words.
Thank you. Person first language.
Person first.
Appreciate the correction.
All right, guys. Don't forget you're awesome. I'm Nathan.
Bill.
Amanda.
We are the In Our Issues crew, and so are you. And we'll see you in the next episode.
Peace.
Peace. Oh, and wartime. Oh. And that concludes the ADHD episode of In Our Issues. Or I should say, the first ADHD episode of In Our Issues. We have every intention of diving back into this topic with guests, and also when we feel like we need to cover new ground with it. There's a link to the book I used for research for this episode in the description, ADHD 2.0. Check it out if you want to dive a little deeper into this topic. Good luck to all my fellow ADHDers out there. We all have the potential to be amazing. Don't let the world shame you into submission. Help everyone understand the way you work. Do more of what keeps your brain engaged. I will too. We got this. Our next episode is another good one. It's all about PTSD and CPTSD. Shout out to the Recovery Center of Hamilton County for sponsoring our equipment. There's a link in the description for recoverycenterhc.org where you can learn more about creative workshops, support groups, and more. Podcast production work by me. Original music composed and produced also by me. I'm Nathan Donnelly, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Don't forget you're awesome.